Hey, hi, how you going? It's your mate Fast Ride, and I have absolutely been loving the Heroes of Might and Magic Olden Era demo. I've played about 50 hours so far and spent a bunch of time on each of the factions, so I thought it was time to jump in and do a way too early tier list and rank each of the units against one another. We're going to go tier by tier, faction by faction, and the reason I want to break it down this way is because I did consider doing it the normal way, where you just kind of go S tier, A tier, etc., while also giving consideration to the unit's power level or their tiers within the game. But I think that's just going to end up getting too messy and be too unintuitive to follow along with. So doing it this way, I think, is going to be the cleanest way that makes the most sense. I hope you guys agree. But I do want to also give a few caveats about the way I've thought about this, so you can try and understand the background logic that I'm using to make these judgments. Now, the first thing is, this is just my experience and my opinions on the game. This is a tier list. It's nothing objective about it. You're obviously going to have a different experience and different opinions, and that's completely fine. That's the entire point of this, is to open up some discussion. I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments down below where you think I went wrong, if I missed any incredible synergies or anything like that. And this tier list is also going to be changing over time. I just want to establish a baseline so that we can come back to this and look at it and go, oh man, what the hell were you thinking? How did you even, miss this incredible synergy or something like that? So we're going to end up getting 2 more factions. That's going to change it up a bunch. We're going to get a whole bunch of balance changes, etc. I just wanted to use this as a starting point. And the other thing is, I am going to be considering each of the units' maximum possibility. So I want to be weighing the potential for the unit given all of the laws within a faction that you can use to buff your units, and also each of their upgrade paths. Now, I'm not actually going to be specifically plotting them based on their upgrade paths, because I do want to dedicate an entire video to all of the best upgrade options. But if a unit is really good because it can be upgraded into another one, that's going to be my consideration for that unit's maximum potential and therefore its ranking. All right, so I'm going to stop yapping now. Let's just jump into the tier list. Okay, so we're going to just kick it off with the T1 units and start with the Rashoth. Now, these guys are pretty good. You can upgrade them into a ranged unit, which is really nice at tier 1 because it does allow you to start clearing the early game map without losing many casualties. But I don't feel like these guys scale very well into the later game, so I'm not confident that they're going to end up very high in this tier. But I am going to move straight into the Skellies and put them immediately above the Rashoth. These guys also have a ranged option, but where I think they outshine these guys is that they do scale better into the late game because they have a lot more growth. Now, that is very much in part thanks to the Necropolis's necromancy ability, allowing you to just stack a lot more of these. But nonetheless, that is one of their strengths. That's part of the faction's overall abilities. So I've just got to rank them a little bit higher for that reason. You're going to get more endgame scaling there. That being said, the Troglodytes can go all the way to the back. I'm not very happy with these guys. I think these guys are dead last. They're decent. Like, you can upgrade them and get the double attack on the Toxic unit, but I don't even know if that's the better upgrade, to be honest. So I was just finding I was underwhelmed with these guys. I just feel like there's less going for these than all of the other options. Now, as for the Swordsmen, I am very tempted to put these guys all the way up into the number 1 slot, and the reason for it is mainly due to the Aegis ability, which I think is going to be very, very powerful. So that's going to give these units and an adjacent unit up to 30% damage reduction from ranged attacks. So I think they're going to help protect your end games, and you can really use these guys strategically. However, in my experience so far, I just didn't feel like I was able to utilize that to its maximum potential. Now, that's very much probably a product of me not being super experienced with the game, and it just might be a skill diff issue. So I feel like if you are a very good player, if you're a better player than me, these guys are probably going to be the unit for you that you can get the most out of tactically speaking. But for me, I just wanted to keep it simple, and I felt like I got more use out of just having mass skellies. So I'm going to put them at number 1, a little bit more overall utility for me, but I can definitely see the case for these guys being up in number 1 instead. Jumping straight into the T2 units, the Cultists are really good. I'm pretty happy with the damage output on these guys, so I think they will end up staying pretty high after all of the other units jump into this ranking. They also have the long reach passive, which allows them to strike enemies from 1 hex away. So it's not full-blown range or anything like that, but it does prevent them from getting counterattacked. which is really nice because they are quite squishy. So it allows you to just chip away at your enemies without having to think, oh, am I going to lose half my stack to a counterattack kind of a thing. So it is nice in that regard. That being said, I just have to jump a little bit ahead and put the crossbowmen all the way up at number 1 because these guys are by far the best unit in tier 2, in my opinion. I still am playing around with both of the upgrades. I think your overall damage output from getting the double shot upgrade is really cool, but there is something to be said about the precision and marksman shot of the marksman upgrade. Overall though, I think whichever upgrade you choose, these guys are just really good. They hit like a truck for a tier 2 unit, and especially for a tier 2 ranged unit. So just like having ranged tier 1 units, having a really strong tier 2 ranged unit, which you're going to be able to access from level 1 anyway, or from your first turn rather, is again going to help you clear out the early game map. But these guys also scale great into the late game, so no really downsides there. I think they're a fantastic tier 2 option, easily the best in my opinion. Now, as for the next two, I really don't know how to rate these two against one another. I think they're easily the last two. Whether or not they go this way or the other way around, I'm not too sure. It's pretty interchangeable. I think I'm just going to leave it like this. These guys have decent, I mean, they both have decent attack. These guys can at least teleport through the traps and stuff, but I don't know. Like, these are both pretty lackluster tier 2 options, even despite or accounting for all of their factions upgrades and abilities. So I'm just going to leave it like that. Happy to dispute the order there, but I think these two are easily number 1 and 2, and then 3 and 4 are quite debatable. Straight into the tier 3, we've got the Uggoshoth Riders up next, and I will say here, I absolutely love the names for all of the Schism units. I think thematically that faction is a really cool entry into the series, but these guys are no joke. They're incredibly strong. They really shine due to their passive abilities though. So these guys have 2 incredibly strong passive abilities. The first is going to make it so that any unit they attack is going to receive an extra 100% damage from your hero's spells for the next 2 turns. So if you're playing a mage build, this is obviously going to increase your damage output massively. Doubling your damage just for going out there and attacking enemy units is crazy strong because you're already going to be hitting like a truck. Magic already does a ton of damage, but what's more than that, if that wasn't enough, they also have a passive ability that is going to make it so that your hero negates all negative terrain movement penalties. So you simply receive no terrain penalties just for having these guys in party, which is insane. So these guys just hanging around, doing their thing is going to benefit you a ton in other ways, in addition to just the damage they put out on the field, which is pretty good. But that being said, the dogs are also incredibly powerful. Now, I don't think I'm going to be able to rate them better than the Uggoshoth Riders, but they are still incredibly strong. Like, I wouldn't blame anyone for putting these guys higher up in the number 1 slot. I think overall tier 3 is probably the most competitive. We'll see how we go with all of the other tiers, but so far this is easily the most competitive tier. These guys are just very well statted, very reliable tier 3 units, and because they're within the Necropolis faction, you're going to get a ton of growth on them. You're going to end up with hordes of these guys doing a ton of damage. So very happy with the dogs as well, but I just don't think they're quite as good as the Uggoshoth Riders, especially when you play them to their maximum potential. Like when you start pairing the riders and really capitalizing on that extra movement and capitalizing on that extra magic damage, I think a good player is going to be able to use this a little more strategically than the dogs, but the dogs are still incredibly strong. The Griffins, however, I think are easily the worst in the tier. Now, I will say aesthetically, I love Griffins. They're one of my favorite creatures throughout the entirety of the franchise, but we have to be objective. I think in this game, they are easily the worst in this tier. And as for the Onyx Dancers, I did actually initially really hate these guys. I was quite underwhelmed with them, but I've come to realize that I was just being an idiot and not fully understanding their potential. These guys are easily the number 1 slot for me, best in slot. I think these guys scale the best into late game in terms of their damage and survivability. They're just incredibly strong once you start getting all of your faction's laws going and you start benefiting from all of those stances that they can take and things like that. They're a ranged unit, unlike all of the others. And I just think overall you get a lot more output out of these guys. I've not been disappointed with these guys. In my first game with Dungeon, I was a little overwhelmed, and then I played a few more and I completely changed my mind. Let me know if you think this tier ranks differently. I'm particularly curious about this one, but for me, this is how I'm going to set my tier 3. Starting our tier 4 units, we've got the Grand Shoth, and these units are pretty good. They're pretty bulky when you upgrade them. And they do have overall good stats, but I don't really have much special to say about them. And I do mostly just want to jump straight into the Minotaurs because I think these guys are by a mile the best tier 4 unit. I do not see any world where you could argue that these other 3 units are better than Minotaurs. These guys feel like a tier 5 unit. They have the morale passive, which means they never drop morale and they gain morale as they start getting damaged. So incredibly strong there. They have the counter-strike ability that allows them to attack first with a counter-strike when they're being attacked to just chop down the enemy units, essentially reducing the damage incoming and just getting free attacks off. Everything about these guys is really good. They're incredibly well statted for tier 4. They're just a mile above everything else. The Lightbringers I'm probably going to put at number 2 just because they're a ranged unit who are pretty good. They are a really cool unit. I think thematically, I'm really happy with the Temple faction overall. They're probably my favorite faction overall, but I can't rate them higher than Minotaurs, that's for sure. So I'm going to put these guys at number 2. The range damage is pretty good here, and I think I can comfortably put the Gravediggers in last. Just not really much going on for these guys. Actually, I think I'm going to quickly swap these two. I think I just am overvaluing the ranged a little bit. These guys are probably better all round. Their survivability is pretty good. It's a tough one, but I think I'm going to leave it like that. Medusa's up next, and these guys are really good. The ability to do the ranged AoE damage is really nice, and they synergize really well with their faction's laws that affect all of your stances and things like that. They also have 2 really good upgrade paths. On one side, you get access to the counter, counter strike or counter shot passive that's going to allow you to do a counter attack at range, which is really cool. And the other one being the petrify ability, which is pretty good as well. I'm really not decided on which way to go there, but both are good options. These guys do really solid damage and just are a great kind of end game unit. So happy to just see where these guys end up. I think it will probably be pretty high because the cavalry can come in and probably just go all the way to the back of this tier. Now, I feel bad for the cavalry because these guys are by no means a bad unit. They're a very strong unit. They're well statted and they do their job. I think they just suffer in this tier specifically because they're the only non-ranged unit in this tier, and range just feels like it's a little more powerful at the moment. Generally speaking, but that's sort of a theme that we've been talking about throughout the entire list so far. So it's not really a surprise that they're there. They're not a bad unit. Each faction obviously just has their ranged units across different tiers. So that's just kind of the way this works out. So cavalry at the back there for that reason. Now the concubus are really hard. I'm actually undecided which side I want to put these guys on compared to the Medusas. I think overall, the Medusas have a little bit better damage, but I feel like this is going to be another one of those situations where if you are a really good player and you're better than me at the game, then you're probably going to find that you get more use out of the Medusas. The concubus, right? Because they have some really good disruption passives that I think you can utilize very well if you're a very tactically minded player and you know how to get all of those debuffs and your buffs and everything going really well. But for simpletons like me who have the tactical depth of a cave troll, I have found just from my playing experience that I get more out of my Medusa stacks. It's just a simple matter of the damage output. But I think it's probably pretty undebatable to put the Liches all the way at number 1, and that's simply due to their ability to resurrect your stacks. So no matter how tactical you are as a player, resurrecting your stacks is incredibly powerful. I don't think there's much debate there. They're a really good unit, and just bringing your stacks back to life is really good. So I think that's the way that this one's going to go for me. I'm pretty comfortable with leaving it like that. But moving on to the tier 6 units, we've got the Death Knight up first, and this guy does have a lot going on for him. I mean, first of all, their momentum is going to scale and carry throughout the battle really, really well, thanks to their abilities War Incarnate and Hungering Hollow, which are going to continue to just put more and more pressure on your opponents over time and give you a sort of inevitability, which I also think is the perfect fit thematically, because these units are of course death, and death is inevitable. But beyond that, I also have to confess I completely missed how powerful one of these upgrades was, because in my first playthrough, I think I just ended up going with the Avatar of War upgrade for no reason at all, really. I just kind of picked one probably. But the Hollow Reaper has a passive that causes its strikes to always kill at least one unit up to tier 7 units, and yes, that does include tier 7 units. So I feel like it should have been worded a little bit differently, but this is obviously going to be very, very strong, and it's going to allow your 1 stacks of Hollow Reapers to just start chopping down enemy tier 7 stacks. And what's more is you compare this with its modifier that's going to cause it to do AoE damage. So that is obviously going to be incredibly strong. But we'll move on to the Hydras next, who I think are easily the weakest in this tier. I don't know, it might just be me and I'm doing something wrong with them, but even when I'm fighting against these guys, I feel like I can mostly just ignore them for the entire battle and then finish them off at the end. Their impact in the game just doesn't really seem that good, at least when compared to the other units in this tier. I feel like their best use case scenario is just plugging a hole in a siege or something like that, but that is just so narrow that I can't rank them any higher on this list. But if there's one unit that we cannot call underwhelming, it is the Arbitrator, who easily get the top slot in this tier for me. The damage output on these guys is just disgusting. I actually had to keep double checking during my first Schism playthrough that I didn't get my tier 7 and my tier 6 mixed up, just based on how much damage these guys were doing. And the Bloated Arbitrator upgrade also has a really cool ability, which is just going to completely stop your opponent from using their spellbook, which is, let me check my notes, good. As for the Inquisitor, I think this one is better than the Hydra, but just not as good as the other two, so I'm just going to slot it in there. It's a tanky little unit, does a decent amount of damage, but these other two just have a bit more going for them. And of course, that just leaves us with our tier 7, which is going to be honestly really hard to rank. I think the devs have done a really good job of balancing each of these out. The only one that I'm really confident about is just putting the Vampires up here, who are going to be last. And I think the reason for that, at least from my gameplay experience, was I just wasn't happy with how many of these I could resurrect. I barely got any vampires off of the necromancy ability, and I feel like the entire faction is balanced around that ability. And because of that, the individual units feel a little bit weaker because you're meant to amass them more easily and recur them. But because I wasn't able to get many of these, they just felt worse than all of the other tier 7 units. But beyond that, the Cthulhu's, or Abyssal, whatever they're called, are really, really, really strong. And one of them just straight up has the ability to cancel out another unit's turn, which is kind of busted. I think they're going to end up in second place for me, and that's because I want to put the Angels in first. I just think the passive ability that these guys have that allows them to just absorb all of your other units' buffs is just insane. Like, these guys get so strong when you start mixing with all of your buff spells. They just do a ton of damage. You've got range on them. They just feel like Titans from the old Heroes games. They're absolutely nuts. I love these units, but I can see these guys being utilized a little bit stronger, thanks to that ability that can just cancel other turns. So that's a close call for me. And then as far as just pure stats and pure damage, the Black Dragons are really good as well, but I think I still have to put them behind these other ones. But that's going to do it for the list. This is the one that I'm going to lock in. Let me know what you think about it in the comments down below. Let's continue the discussion down there. The one thing I do want to comment on before we go though is just how overall balanced it is. I think the devs did a really good job with that. We did have a few of the factions dominate within a particular tier, but it doesn't feel like any of the factions are well and truly ahead of the others because they come out on top across some other tier somewhere along the way. So I think the devs did a fantastic job there, and I'm looking forward to seeing how the other new factions are implemented into this. So if you want to keep an eye out and see how I adjust this moving forward, remember to subscribe to the channel. Going to be doing a ton of Heroes content moving forward, having an absolute blast with the game. But I'm going to leave it there. Thank you all for watching. I'll catch you guys next time. Have a good one.